Hi, my name is Bev Cluth, and I'm a Master Gardener with Kittitas County Master Gardeners. Well, what is that? Well, our organization is composed of all volunteers, each with about 100 plus hours of science-based training that was developed by Washington State University Extension, covering horticulture and environmental stewardship. Why do we do that? Well, the main goal is to pass on our information and knowledge to community members by staffing plant clinics, providing education and community outreach, and by continuing our own education. So today I will be providing a presentation on growing broccoli and cauliflower in Kittitas County, and I hope you enjoy it and find it helpful in your own garden. Broccoli and cauliflower are members of the genus Brassicaceae, or Brassica, which covers the mustard and cabbage family. This whole family is categorized as coal crops, or cold crops as they're often known, because they really like cool weather. They're great for a spring crop and a fall crop. And in Kittitas County, it's important to choose the short season varieties, particularly for the spring, because summer comes quicker than we expect and the hot temperatures don't make good broccoli and cauliflower. Broccoli is easier to grow. Cauliflower is a little bit more fussier, and there are some more problems with it. We'll talk about that later. And both of these vegetables are a great source of fiber, and they have low calories, but broccoli is more nutritional overall than cauliflower. There are over 100 broccoli varieties, and you'll see that they differ in the shape and size of their heads, whether they produce side shoots, whether they're eaten for their stems or just their buds, etc., etc. My choices this season are going to be, that I'm going to grow in my Upper County garden, will be the Calabrese, which is the kind that's popular in the grocery store with a big thick green buds. And also I grew these last year, Desiccio. It's an Italian variety. They have great tasting stalks and little buds, and they're super easy to grow here for me in Kittitas County. Here's a really good new variety that would be excellent for Kittitas County because it has 50 days to harvest, and it's supposed to be pretty disease resistant and tastes really nice as well. Unfortunately, the seeds were sold out when I went to buy it, so I wasn't able to try it this season. Cauliflower varieties, just like broccoli varieties, there's over 100 of them. The one thing you want to remember for cauliflower, if you get a white curd variety, there's something that you need to do called blanching, which protects the white curd from turning brown in the sun. You end up needing to wrap the leaves around them at a certain point in their growth stage. My choice this year is going to be Purple of Sicily because I didn't want to, well, two reasons. I didn't want to have to worry about the blanching issue, and it also is supposed to be very disease resistant, pretty, and it's very tasty. The soil preferred by broccoli and cauliflower, and basically all brassica crops, is a coarse, sandy, loamy soil. And you definitely want it to be well drained because these plants do not like sitting in water and they don't like being dried out. Broccoli's more tolerant of it, but cauliflower will do some weird stuff. So the other thing that's really important to do, I think, is to have a 2 to 3 inch topping of compost or another organic matter on the top of your bed. And the soil also they like is more acidic with pH between 6 and 7. These plants really like either full sun or 6 hours a day, even though it seems counterintuitive because they are cold season crops. They do like a lot of sun to get big and tasty. Spacing for these plants I think is important because they do get pretty big at maturity. It's kind of incredible. So in a raised bed, I usually go 1.5 square feet, although they say 1 square foot. In my experience, that's not enough. And then planting in rows, you want to make sure you leave enough space between the rows and between the plants, as is listed on the slide. When you plant your transplants in the garden, You could fertilize them. It's not mandatory, but it is recommended. And you want to start with a balanced fertilizer that has all the same numbers, like a 10-10-10, which would be the same amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And then broccoli, maybe after 3 or 4 weeks after transplanting them, give them a low nitrogen fertilizer. Now, cauliflower, on the other hand, it needs a high nitrogen fertilizer, and that's the same schedule for fertilizing. So you want to time planting your plants so that they're ready to be harvested before it gets really hot in the summer. Because what will happen then is that if you have, like a 10 days or more that are above 75 degrees typically, your plants, your buds, and your curds are going to get bitter and they're going to taste horrible. So the best thing to do, in my experience, I think, is to follow the seed packet for when to start the seeds inside or outside. And a general rule of thumb, it's like 6 to 8 weeks before the average last frost date in the spring. But again, it's really important to look at the variety that you're planting and follow the seed packet recommendations. We should always start with a good seedling mix or a seed starter mix. Why? Well, you don't really want to have soil to start your seeds with because soil brings along other things like bacteria, mold, and spores. Typically, your seed starting mix is sterilized and it contains perlite or peat moss or coconut coir, and it's a perfect medium for growing seeds without growing anything else. What won't grow in a great seedling mix are mold spores, the kind that can dampen off seeds, which will cause the seedling's root to rot and the seedling will die. The next thing you need to know is when to actually start your seeds. So I'm going to say it really depends upon the packet. So for example, this particular seed, broccoli de Ciccio, it's ready in 60 to 70 days. And right now, it's too early for me to plant this particular seed because it's about 12 weeks before the last frost date. So if you look at the back of the package, see it says start seeds 4 to 6 weeks before your average last frost date. So pay attention to that information on your seed pack. Now here is the cauliflower I'm going to plant, the purple of Sicily. On that seed packet, it tells me so very early indoors. So it's about 12 weeks before our last frost. So I'm going to start this one now. Plus I've never planted cauliflower before, so I'm being really conservative on when to start. This variety of broccoli, the Calabrese, is a new one for me this year. And I'm going to start it in the beginning of March indoors because I want to make sure that my seeds germinate and they're ready for planting in the beginning of May. This variety is supposed to be a 60-day to harvest variety. Here I've got my little plant pots ready to go. I've got the starter seed mix in there and I've also dampened it. And I haven't packed it too tightly because it was pretty damp. And our next step will be to put the seeds in. So I'm planting my purple cauliflower seeds and I've put 2 little holes in because I'm going to put 2 or more seeds per little plant pot there. And doesn't matter if I get more because I got lots of seeds. But the holes are probably about a 1/4 inch deep and I'm very carefully trying to get 1 seed per hole. Okay, here are the Calabrese broccoli seeds. They're pretty small and they look very much like the cauliflower seeds. So I did 1 set first so I didn't get them mixed up, and now I've got my other set of tray here for the broccoli, and I'm going to go ahead and put 2 seeds per tray, per pot rather, in there as well. What I do when I'm done planting my seeds is I sprinkle the top of them with a little bit of peat moss, and then I kind of hold them in place, and then I spray them gently with water. So I've put my seeds underneath a little humidity dome inside of a tray and put them underneath a grow light. Now, you don't need a grow light. You could use a fluorescent light. You wouldn't even need a light for broccoli and cauliflower, I don't think. You could put them close to a window. You don't need a heating pad because remember they are a cool season crop. The room that I grow my seeds in for broccoli and cauliflower is actually kept at about 50 degrees, and that seems to work just fine. Okay, so here is a video of the seeds as they have germinated. And so now I'm ready to take off the humidity cover because once they germinate, the seeds need as much air and light as possible to keep growing. So you don't want to leave that humidity cover on any longer because it could actually kill the seeds. You're ready to transplant your seedlings out of these little starter pots and into regular potting soil and fertilizer when they get their first true leaves. Now, what you saw in the previous video, those were the cotyledon leaves. Those are actually the first leaves that come up. It's part of the seed itself. What you're looking for is a shoot that'll come up after that, and then 2 leaves will sprout off of that shoot. At that point, you're ready to transplant them. Now, when I say transplant them, I'm just saying into a larger pot and leaving it inside still to continue growing. Before we can move on to plant these lovely little transplants outside, we have to go through a process called hardening off. And that's where you're gradually exposing your indoor seedlings to outdoor conditions and toughening them up so they can survive in their new environment. I think reading through this slide will really help you understand how to harden off your transplants. Basically, you want to start this process 1 to 2 weeks before you're going to plant them out. And it gets a little tough because it's really weather dependent. It could actually be a process as short as 5 to 7 days. But really you want to be able to have your plants hardened off to the point where you've left them outside overnight for at least 1 or 2 nights before you plant them in the ground. Okay, now you've got your transplants hardened off and it's time to plant them. So you want to set them deeply into the soil, into the hole you've dug, so that they're almost up to the first leaves on the bottom. And you want to compact the dirt around there firmly, but be careful not to snap off the, the stems. Then you'll mulch around the base of the plant and go ahead and fertilize with a balanced fertilizer. For the first week, what you want to do is make sure and check those transplants, make sure they're getting enough water, not getting too much water. You really want to baby anything you plant for that first week to make sure it's settling in properly. I thought it was really important to have a separate little slide in here for mulching your broccoli and cauliflower. It's really important to keep them from bolting, which will shorten your harvest season and make your vegetables taste bitter and awful. So here's some examples of mulch that you can use. I myself actually put a couple of inches of compost on top of my bed, and then I'll put pine needles because I've got a bunch of them on top of that. Okay, now you've got them out there in your garden. Let's talk about the threats to them, the pests and diseases. I'm going to go ahead and give you a little demo of the HortSense website that WSU has provided. It's a wonderful tool for identifying pests and diseases and what to do about them. The key here is when you get out there, use cole crops and search by plant name. Here's my demo. Go to a web browser, can be any web browser, and key in HortSense website. That's the easiest way to bring it up. You'll see it in that list and then just click on it in the list of the search results and voila, it'll bring you to this. It'll bring you to this, which is the homepage of the HortSense website. What you want to do is you want to go over to the left and select plant, and in search plant problems, in plant you'll put cole crops. When you click then, it'll bring up another screen that will show you all the pests and diseases for cole crops. Okay, we've got black rot, club root, downy mildew, oedema, aphids, cabbage maggot, flea beetles, imported cabbage worm, bloopers, and thrips. And if you click on the highlighted item, it'll bring you to yet another screen that gives you all you need to know, well, mostly all that you need to know about that particular plant problem, non-chemical management, and chemical management. I will go ahead and save this website in your favorites, bookmark it, so you have it to frequently look at when you need it. After you've kind of gone through the disease and pest control issues, there are a few other problems that can happen with broccoli and cauliflower. The biggest one is bolting, and it's with the cold crops. What that means is that the plant has started going to flower because the ground has gotten too hot, and you're no longer going to get your wonderful buds or heads, and it's going to taste bitter. So the cause of that, again, is warm temperatures, over 75 degrees for a run of days, maybe a week. Could be nitrogen deficiency. If you aren't having warm temperatures, you probably want to have your soil tested. And another possible cause could be inconsistently watering. And then talking about how much fussier cauliflower is than broccoli, there are several other problems that can occur if the conditions aren't just right. If it's too hot, too damp, it'll stress out the transplant, the soil has too much nitrogen, or you waited too long to harvest it because, it got too hot. There's these different problems that can manifest themselves, and they're listed on this slide. I certainly don't want to scare you off from growing cauliflower. I'm paying attention to these things because this is actually my first season to try it. So I'm hoping that I have great success. As always, if you think you have a nitrogen problem with your soil, you should have it tested. And I think the main thing here is to just keep an eye on your plants and make adjustments to water when needed, mulching, and also remember that the weather doesn't always cooperate with you. So, keep an open mind. Knowing when to harvest your broccoli and cauliflower is going to be based on the weather, and of course the variety that you planted. So you want to make sure you time it so you have the biggest buds or heads available without them turning to flowers or bolting, because once it gets too hot, again, the plant will bolt. Broccoli is ready when the flowers are green and before they start beginning to open. And the heads on the larger varieties on both broccoli and cauliflower are going to start small, but they will get larger. So watch them based upon the days to maturity. Storing fresh vegetables works better. You can store them longer if you don't cut into them and you don't wash them. That sounds crazy, but it's true. So for a cauliflower, the whole head, you'd want to wrap the unwashed head in a damp paper towel, and you can store it in your refrigerator for probably about 2 to 4 weeks. But once you cut the florets and wash them, you probably got about a week in the refrigerator. It's the same strategy for broccoli. Any unwashed stems and flowers will keep in the refrigerator actually for a week or more, and then just wash those before preparing. If you want to freeze them and keep them longer, make sure to blanch them first, and then they should store in the freezer for about a year. Well, that wraps up this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot and are able to proceed with a successful broccoli and cauliflower spring harvest. And I always conclude with the Master Gardener of Kittitas County's garden calendar with a link to the website. It's a great bit of information for gardening throughout the year in Kittitas County.